Welcome, everybody, to our podcast on the house on RiskWire. We're coming to you today from Spotify and Apple via audio. And for those of you on YouTube, you get to see us as well. This is episode 14, believe it or not. My name is Eric Fox. I'm Chief Economist here at Veros Real Estate Solutions.
Hi there, I'm John Felice. I am the Director of Data Science and Modeling here at Veros.
And today we thought we would take a little bit of a detour on a topic that we haven't talked too much about, and that is, can artificial intelligence be used to value houses? So we'll focus on that here today. So before we start talking about AI or artificial intelligence, let's discuss how valuing houses takes place today. So clearly the easiest way to value a house is if we have the sales price, and that's the sales price between a willing buyer and a seller, or sometimes we call that an arm's length transaction. For example, it's not sold between a parent and a child at a discounted price. It's in a normal sale process. So a sale price is kind of the gold standard for what a house is valued at. Well, there's other ways a house can be valued as well. So for example, appraisers, whenever a potential customer wants to maybe get a home equity line of credit, they hire an appraiser. The appraiser says the house is worth a certain amount, and then based on that, the bank is willing to lend that particular borrower some money. The appraiser is trained as a real estate expert to know how to value houses based on previous sale prices of that house, market, how it's gone up or down in that area, and also comparable houses in the general neighborhood, how they have sold. Real estate agents are experts as well on the market and have expertise at valuing houses. Sometimes they look at list prices. Sometimes those aren't as good, perhaps, as appraised values, but they are a method to value houses. And then finally, formal computer models today can value homes, and those are known as AVMs, or automated valuation models. And there are commercial-grade AVM models, such as ones that a bank might use, and there are marketing-grade AVM models that are designed for marketing purposes that are not quite as accurate, but just meant to attract attention to a given website or a given property. So let's drill in a little bit to the commercial grade AVMs. These are the automated valuation models that a bank might use. So what are the strengths of those models? Well, one of the strengths of an automated valuation model is they are not limited to arbitrary numbers of comparable sales. Oftentimes an appraisal might use 3 comparable sales or 6 comparable sales that are similar to the subject property being valued, because that's how many spaces there are on the appraisal form. However, an AVM could literally use hundreds of comparable sales in the area and wouldn't matter to the computer model. Another strength of AVMs is that they can precisely quantify how the market's changed over a previous sale price, and it doesn't rely on rough approximations. So if they see the house sold 3 years ago, for a certain amount, they can very precisely calculate how much that particular neighborhood went up in the last 3 years and can get that value very accurately, whereas an appraiser is going to have more difficulty doing that. Also, AVMs can precisely quantify how things like an extra bedroom or how much a pool is worth. Oftentimes an appraiser will use factors or just rules of thumb that a pool is worth $5,000. But an AVM could actually analyze the data and say houses with pools in this particular neighborhood sell for $11,000 more than those without. And one weakness, however, of AVMs is an AVM can't be sure of the condition of a property. So the assumption that an AVM would necessarily have to make is that the condition is typical for the area. If we look at a large number of comparable sales and we see that there are, a whole lot of them, on average, the typical condition is going to be most likely, and so that's what the AVM is going to have to assume. So one question, can technology be used to help us assess the condition of the property?
Absolutely. This is what's really cool about where the industry is heading moving forward. As you mentioned, condition is one of the biggest weaknesses for traditional AVMs, in the sense that they are assuming the average condition for the area. It's really interesting when we here at the modeling team at Veros have modeled using condition as a variable in just a simple linear regression model, which will highlight which features are the most important. We noticed, obviously, first, it's driven by square footage, but interestingly, second is condition. We're finding that condition is incredibly important in predicting the value. And what's really cool is here now at Veros, we've encapsulated a way to accurately collect the condition on properties all across the country. But the coolest piece of that is the data has always been out there, and especially true with the way the industry is moving more and more digital. So when I say the data is out there, what I mean by that is photos. The photos exist. Photos are capturing the condition of a property just the same way an appraiser who's walking through a property would. They're using their eyes, and in the sense of a computer algorithm model, it is using its eyes to now assess the condition. So these photos can come from various sources, which is incredible. So we have MLS listing images, we could have inspections, we could have appraisals. The list really goes on and on. For anything that the industry does involving photos now can be utilized to quantify the condition of that given property.
So what technology is capable of assessing condition like you've described of these photos?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is certainly a very advanced technology that is required to assess condition at scale, and to do so by ingesting lots of photos. First, you need some very high-powered GPUs. And the reason for that is you have to run these photos through neural networks. There's all types of algorithms you can do for that, but it has to go through a neural network in order to understand the pixel-to-pixel relationship. Obviously, this is getting very technical in there. But the theory of this technology has existed for a long, long time. It's just now that the hardware has caught up. And so now we have these really high-powered GPUs that we're able to evaluate or rather pass photos through at scale and train very sophisticated models on millions of images, labeled images for given condition and whatnot. So the recent advancement rather in hardware, specifically GPU computing, is what has now made this technology capable. Where this is something we're doing here at Veros, is capturing condition at scale for properties all across the country, given just all we need is a few images.
Well, that's very interesting, John. And just for our listeners out there, GPU, if you're not familiar with the terminology, it's graphical processing unit. It is it has occurred after the CPU, which has been very common for a long, long time. The GPUs are like CPUs, except they go a whole lot faster and they're the reason for many companies that you've heard of that have been stars on the stock market on Wall Street, such as NVIDIA, TSMC, and so forth. So this is one comment. Another comment I wanted to make was you indicated millions of photos, and I think I heard the other day it's actually we've exceeded 1 billion photos. So now I guess we could say billions of photos. We're getting there. So this is a very, very exciting time.
That is true, Eric. We did recently cross the billions milestone here just in the last few weeks. This has been in the works for a few years now. Obviously, you don't get to billions of images in just a matter of months or whatnot. So very exciting, very proud of the team and the accomplishments that we've made. Certainly 1 billion is very impressive.
All right. So let's take a look at some photos. I think proof is always in the pudding when you look. So we have multiple scales that we use to show the condition of a property. One of the scales we use is very similar to what you might see on Yelp or on Google or OpenTable for a restaurant review between 1 star and 5 stars. So you could see a restaurant that has 3.74 stars or 4.68 stars. And similarly, we can do the same with the condition. So let's take a look at our first property. It's a condition score, which is on the lower end. And if we look, we can see that the condition score we've given for the bathroom is a 1.59. The front exterior is a 1.22, and the overall Veros home score, as we call it, is a 1.56. And as you can see, there's some definite, on the left with the bathroom, there's some definite problems. Looks like it needs to be totally gutted and renovated. Outside, it looks like there is a lot of repairs that are needed. And so this would be indicative of a condition that's one of our lowest conditions, and it would be how this particular model would score, and what kinds of properties would be scored, say between 1.0 and 2.0.
Yeah, Eric, just to add on to some of your thoughts there with the 1.0 to 2.0 properties and the example we have here. Obviously, the model is anchoring on a lot of the damage that is present. We're training these models to pick up on different patterns. It's pattern recognition at the end of the day between a lot of the pixels there. And so that's precisely what it's finding in those images. What's really cool with our 1.0 to 5.0 scale here, similar to the modern rating scale that you see, the 1 to 5 stars, like a Yelp review, a Google review, whatnot, is our 1.0 to 2.0 bucket is what would traditionally be considered that C5 to C6 range in the UAD forms that you would see on a traditional appraisal. That obviously impacts a lending decision. So for us here at Veros, when we're using the VHS score, we know that a VHS below 2.0 is something that we would raise a red flag to. A client who is purchasing our VHS scores, we would communicate to them, obviously, that, hey, if you're seeing a score less than a 2.0, this might be one you want to send a human out to get an additional data point. This might be a property you don't want to lend on because it would be a C5 or a C6 type of category. So below that 2.0, as we saw there with the images, that clearly is going to be the properties that are in severe distress and should be treated as such.
All right, well, let's take a look at the next category, which of course is 2.0 to 3.0. And so here I think you can see that if we look at this one, now this one clearly doesn't look as bad, but we have the bathroom on the left at a 2.11, the kitchen 2.52, and the overall Veros home score 2.44. Does this look like it's uninhabitable? No. Does it look dated and in serious need of updating? Yes. And that's what we'll kind of typically see in these 2.0 to 3.0 buckets, just in great need of updating, in great need of little TLC to get it more in the category that you would say, hey, this is in nice condition. So just a little bit of distinction there between our first category and our second category. And if we continue on, let's take a look at, if we go up to just a little bit above our 3.0 category, now we're sort of in the middle range. And if we look at this one, you can see the overall Veros home score is a 3.37, the bathroom a 3.33, kitchen's a 3.41. And these looks like a fine home that anybody would be happy to live in. Does it look over the top luxurious and high condition? No. Does it look in need of significant repairs? No. It looks very typical. It looks like a typical home. And so the scores are precisely showing that. Now, John, what happens if we go up to a little bit higher category and now we're in the 4.0 range? What are we seeing with the example we have here?
Yeah, Eric, so here now we've got a property that's showing a 4.03 on our VHS score. The bathroom we've identified at a 3.95 and the kitchen here at a 4.37. And so what you start to see as you enter into this 4.0 territory is these are the type of properties that are typically commanding a premium. This in the typical UAD form would be similar to your C2 or maybe C1 if it's a C1 for those who are not aware is the high end of the traditional condition rating system, but that means new construction. It might be a little bit of a broken system in that new construction doesn't always command a premium. In fact, just within the past few weeks, we've now seen new construction properties now selling at a discount relative to current properties, ones that are already built and have been around for years and years. So the traditional system of rating properties, that C6 through C1, does struggle to capture the premium side of things. And this is something that we're very proud of with the VHS is the properties where you're above a 4.0, especially in a region where the median for that area is not a 4.0. Let's say the median was a 3.25. That's a really solid score, but all of a sudden you get a 4.0 or higher property. You know for a fact that that property is commanding a premium relative to its neighbors. And so that's precisely what you're seeing here. This is clearly a far more polished property. It's much more pristine condition. Looks like it may have been recently renovated. It's really well upkept. And so that's what we see with our 4.0 level of properties. Those are where we have certainly entered into the premium category.
Definitely. When you said it looks a little more polished, I was just looking at the granite on the countertops in that kitchen with the 4.0 plus property. Let's take a look at one that now is near the top. So now we're pushing 5. So we're well into the 4s and almost pushing 5. So here's an example. And if you look at this is 4.87 is the Veros home score. Front exterior, wow, looks really nice, 4.52. That kitchen almost can't get any better than that. Very custom, very high-end stone on the waterfall countertop at 4.95. Clearly custom cabinets that were designed. That is definitely a luxurious home, and so the models pick up on that. And clearly, this type of property would have premium valuations associated with it. All right, well, that's really interesting, how the models scored those photos, and it did so in a way that is totally intuitive. And if you or I were to score those models just looking at them, I probably would have scored them all very similarly. So let's talk a little bit about, it's pretty clear, AI, at least in these examples, seems like it's working. So how is it working? So if we step back, when I think of a model, I think of it predicts, maybe we have the price of a house, we know the square footage, we know the number of bedrooms, we know the number of bathrooms, etc. And so if I get a lot of data, maybe I can do something like a regression model. And so I could create a model that predicts the price as a function of those variables. So if I were to substitute in that my house is 2,000 square feet and 4 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, out comes a predicted price of $502,000. Okay, that's something I can picture doing. It's familiar, it's ordinary. But now with this AI model stuff, you said earlier, maybe we have 30 JPEG files from an appraiser that they took photos of when they were on site doing an inspection. So how in the world does AI then produce a condition score of, say, 3.58 out of 5, like some of those examples we just looked at? That seems just like something totally different than standard modeling.
Absolutely. It is a leap forward in terms of modeling capability. But I would say it actually doesn't really break your brain too much when you start to think about how fundamentally the model is producing an output. So the way we train the model is that we show it millions of images that experts have rated already with a different level of condition, or maybe a different room type. And over time, the model learns the nuances of the pixels to determine the differences between what is maybe severely distressed condition versus something that is in pristine condition. And it's really interesting, the same way you train this model, obviously you're using hundreds of thousands, if not millions of images, but it's actually the same way you would teach a child to understand the difference between maybe a cat and a dog. You show them a picture of a cat, you show them a picture of a dog, and you repeat, hey, this is a cat, this is a cat, this is a cat, and then this is a dog, this is a dog. And you continue to show them different examples, and over time, your child learns how to identify a cat versus a dog, and it just becomes subconscious. It becomes very, very easy to do so. And the same is true with how we've trained our AI model to identify condition. It's been led by what experts have said the condition on properties were. It was able to capture all of the nuances between those various differences in the pixels themselves to then quantify a condition score at the end of the day. But the most fascinating part of that, I would say, is not the ability to produce a condition score, but rather to produce a consistent condition score across every single image it ever sees. So a property in New England is going to be evaluated exactly the same as a property in Southern California, which maybe today isn't the case with appraisers. So I could elaborate a little bit further on the process there, because it is a multi-step process. Obviously, we are achieving a condition score calculation at the end of the day, but I could potentially walk you through a little bit of how we do that, because it is a multi-step process.
Well, it would seem like condition, if I were scoring a kitchen versus scoring a bathroom versus scoring a laundry room, it's a little bit different what makes a laundry room better versus what makes a kitchen better.
Absolutely. You couldn't be more right there. The nuances of condition definitely vary by the specific room type that you're looking at. So the first step in this process is to identify which room the model is looking at for a specific image. Something like water damage means something entirely different in a bathroom than maybe it does in a living room. And there are certain trends of damage that are present in bathrooms versus living rooms as well. So first we train a model to understand the different room types, and we do that in the same way I mentioned just previously. You give it hundreds of thousands of examples of this is what a bathroom looks like, this is what a bathroom looks like, this is a kitchen. But we don't tell it, hey, there's a toilet, that's a bathroom. What we do is we provide the label. This is a bathroom image, and it's on the model to understand the nuances of the pixel relationships of those images. And over time, the model, while it doesn't know what a toilet is by name, it knows that that shape and look of a toilet is related to bathrooms. And that's how it's able to identify, say, a bathroom from a very familiar, consistent feature, which would be the, or fixture, rather, if you want to go technical, would be the toilet itself. So first we teach it to identify the room type so we can route it to the respective condition score for that room type.
Okay, so now once we know the room, you said a minute ago, it's a multi-step process. So now that we know that, say, we have a bathroom, what's the next step?
Yeah, absolutely. So after we've identified the room, we route it to the proper model for assessing the condition of that specific room. So in that case, we've then trained models to identify what distressed kitchen versus livable kitchen versus premium, pristine condition looks like for a kitchen or a bathroom or the exterior of a property. The list goes on and on. And those, so we identify the room type, then we pass it to the proper model to evaluate condition relative to that specific room type. So you're getting a very consistent opinion of the condition for its given room type rather than for all rooms.
Oh, very interesting. Very interesting. Okay, well, let's continue on. And so now it sounds like we know the room, we know the conditions, and now we aggregate all those together across all the rooms. So with these AI models, we said that if we have the 30 JPEG photos and a condition score of 3.58 that comes out, it's very similar to data like 2,000 square feet or 4 bedrooms or 2 bathrooms. It's just that instead of 2,000 square feet, it's a photo. Which is really different than maybe traditional models of the past.
Yep, absolutely. So the difference there, like I mentioned, is in the input. So rather than providing something like bedrooms, bathrooms, square footage, and landing at a final valuation, these models instead take the image as a whole and all of the pixels themselves as input. So interestingly, it actually scales closer to hundreds of thousands of individual inputs. But because there's such a high granularity, the model is able to capture those patterns that are associated with, like I mentioned, distressed condition or damage or a very pristine condition, because it has been shown over and over and over again examples that experts have rated themselves.
So for example, if I were looking at a photo of an exterior view of a home from outside, and I noticed the top third of the view was very uniform and perhaps lighter in color than the bottom 2/3 of the picture, I might say, if I were a model learning, hey, this kind of looks like a sky. This looks like a building sitting beneath the sky. This must be an exterior view of this home. Or alternatively, perhaps I'm looking at a room and I see toward the top of that room, I see a very bright light that's all concentrated, very large. I might say I'm in the middle of a dining room. and that's the chandelier I'm looking at. So over time, I sort of train my thinking, just like cats and dogs, and it's using the light versus the dark pixels in that photo to assess what room it's likely to be in. Is that sort of what AI is doing?
Yes, absolutely. You couldn't be more right there. It is picking up on those patterns. Interestingly, maybe a little bit of backstory, quick segment here, to a quick fun little tidbit is neural networks in their original design, and the intention behind the neural network was to mimic the human brain. And when you look at a specific thing, let's say you're looking at a hole in the wall, we've got drywall here and there's a major hole in it. There is a specific neuron pathway that is firing in your brain to identify, hey, that's a hole in the wall. Well, the exact same thing is true with our models. Mm-hmm. There is a specific neuron pathway that is firing for those digital models to identify this is a hole in the wall from the pixels that I've seen for this image. And because there is a hole in the wall, I associate that with distressed condition. And so it's really cool. It's able to pick up on these patterns in the same way that the human brain does.
All right. Well, very interesting. So I think if we continue on here, so it's nice to see that we can predict the property condition from photos. And so how is that going to then be useful to AVMs? So at the beginning of the podcast, we said that automated valuation models assume a typical property condition of that area to estimate value. So if that particular property is in a very high-end neighborhood, maybe the typical property condition is a 4.2. So the AVM, if it had to value a property, it would assume that that particular property is much like the typical of that neighborhood. So if we see a property that is better than the typical condition for the neighborhood, its valuation estimate can be increased. Conversely, if we see that lower than a typical condition for that particular property, its value could be reduced. So with the AVM, it allows us to increase or decrease the value of a property based on photo evidence that we have for what the condition of that property is relative to its neighbors. And this is what we're debuting with our new AVM called VeroValue Elite, and we'll be releasing that here very soon. So thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Eric Fox. I'm happy that you could join us. And please follow us for more On the House episodes on Spotify and Apple. For those of you who are listening to us today on Spotify or Apple, and you didn't get to see some of the photos that we showed with some of our examples, please feel free to watch this On the House episode on YouTube, where you'll be able to see those as well. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.